Welcome back, folks, to FreepCast, the podcast of the Mankato Free Press. My name is Joe Spear. I'm the managing editor, and I'm here today with our political reporter, Holly Marie Moore. We've got a lot of things to cover today, but one thing I want to make sure we do cover it, and it's good news for us. We now have a sponsor for this podcast. Minnesota Valley Federal Credit Union is sponsoring this podcast and the journalism we hope to bring to everybody. So if you get something out of this podcast and you enjoy it, thank the folks at Minnesota Valley Federal Credit Union. We appreciate their support. A lot of news today. We're going to just hit some of the highlights of the last week, and then we'll talk about Governor Walz, who was in Mankato yesterday for the first time since his vice presidential run.
Yeah.
And we had a good 45 minutes with him, and he also was out at the dam, so we can talk about that. But let me just hit some news highlights. Some not so great news. Mankato East student died after a weekend skiing accident at Mount Cato. And there is a GoFundMe established for Joshua Jubarian. So check that out. Our sympathies go out to the Jubarian family, and I'm sure the community will rally around that cause. North Mankato is one of the cities being eyed for one of these bigger data centers, which are interesting. They've been popping up all over Minnesota. The concern is, I think people are worried about the electricity they demand and the water. So that can be kind of a continuing saga. The interest is very preliminary for North Mankato. These companies just come in and kind of put in hey, we're interested in your community, and then the community has to sign a non-disclosure agreement, although part of it is public. So we're pursuing that to find out exactly who it is, but they just do this, and I think in ways to sort of hold a spot if they're interested, they become interested. It's a big thing, with AI, coming now. 3 area residents were part of the January 6th riots that where they were pardoned by President Trump. He pardoned 1,500 people altogether, and there were 3 of them here. So we have a story on that if you want to check it out. Mankato Movie Theater downtown has kind of a new twist. They're showing old classic films like Gone with the Wind and some others. I don't know if they'll get Casablanca. It's a great old film, but that's sort of interesting. New movie theater, new options there. Big news out of St. Peter was the city of St. Peter purchased the old Scholarship America campus with some really nice buildings and some acreage. And they're going to move a lot of their administrative offices up there. It probably will be a while yet, but that was kind of big news. I believe they bought it for like $1.3 million, and they're going to invest $6 million in remodeling. So big news for folks in St. Peter. But let's get on to the news of the day, the big news. And we had front page story today. Governor Walz was in Mankato to announce his bonding proposal at the Rapidan Dam, and he was doing so because it's a $900 million bonding proposal, but he said he's asking for $10 million for the Rapidan Dam to work on the bridge, I believe, wasn't it, Holly?
Some restoration to help prevent erosion, I think, is part of what that money is set aside for. But yeah, it was his first public appearance back in Mankato since the vice presidential campaign. And so Casey and I were down there yesterday, and construction was well underway. And yeah, he talked a lot about what his bonding proposal would include. And yeah, there's a lot to dive into when it comes to that.
Yeah, I know we were expecting some state money and federal money, of course, but this comes pretty timely, and I don't know if we contemplated $10 million in the bonding bill, which should get support, I would think, from area legislators rebuilding the Rapidan Bridge and dismantling the dam, and there's a lot of work involved in that, but I would think it would be a pretty bipartisan issue. We've got some Republicans representing that area, some Democrats. Seems like it would be pretty much a no-brainer. What else do you remember about what Governor Walz said about that project.
Yeah, so it's going to be, I think a lot of that money is going to go towards kind of prevention of erosion in the area. And then for the bonding project in particular, he's also proposing the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension Center in Mankato has been a project that's kind of been a long time coming.
Yeah,
I think
a big deal.
Yeah, so $68 million for that, and then there's some money set aside for Minnesota State colleges and universities. And you and I had recently met with President Itch and SCC President Annette Parker to talk about their projects, and those have both increased due to inflation. And as you may know, the bonding bills have kind of been on and off for the past couple of years, and so people are kind of eager to see one pass this year.
Yeah, and this is a budget year, which is not normally a bonding year, right? So they're kind of stacking up a lot of work together in one session that's going to start late, right? We know that court case just yesterday, the Supreme Court heard the sort of complex case of the legislature and who's in charge. It's about, so it was 67 after the election in the House. And then one Democrat who won, he was disqualified because he didn't live in the district, had a court ruling. So then it was 67, and the Republicans thought, well, we have a quorum, we have a majority, we're going to start to do business. The Democrats did not show up at all. And now it's before the Supreme Court on what is a quorum. It doesn't seem like state law is really super clear about it. I mean, they don't say it's got to be 68 or it's got to be a majority of the seated legislators. I was reading the court case, and it seems like, the Supreme Court could decide we're not going to do anything, let you figure it out yourselves, or they could rule for one side or the other on what a quorum is. And then, of course, I think the Republican defense has been the court shouldn't even be involved here because it's our business and it's a separation of powers kind of issue. But that'll be really interesting to see how that play out. And I don't know if I would think they're going to rule sooner than later on this to get it going.
Yeah, I think so. And kind of going back to our conversation with Governor Walz yesterday, he was able to stop into our newsroom a bit. We asked him, I think you asked him, Joe, whether or not we're going to get a bonding bill this year. And he felt fairly confident that they would put something together. And he also talked a little bit about, and you had asked him this too, whether or not it was possible for a standalone bonding bill or a bill without any strings attached to any partisan legislation to pass. And you want to talk a little bit about what he said to you there?
Yeah, I think, we've talked about this issue in the past where the bonding bill used to be negotiated between Democrats and Republicans, and you get your project in Redwood Falls, we'll get our project in Mankato, and it was kind of a horse trading thing, this project for that. That was always the negotiation, which project. But now it's turned into, well, we don't know if we're going to support a bonding bill at all unless you, and the Republicans are doing this, unless you agree to make changes to these other policy ideological issues that are sometimes difficult for Democrats to get behind and support. And I think Governor Walz, said he never likes to say anything's off the table when he starts these negotiations, but I think he did say he wasn't going to deal bonding with like reducing vaccines in schools or anything with reproductive rights. So that'll be interesting. I keep hearing, he sounded very positive, and he mentioned a few Republicans. He keeps mentioning Greg Davids, who's one of the involved in the tax committees, Republican, who seems very open and really positive about bonding. And so it sounded like, even though maybe the front line rhetoric could be, we're against. And Walz wants to change the sales tax to apply it to more things, but lower it, and they're against that. And so it's an interesting debate going forward. But yeah, it did sound very positive on the bonding side. I've listened to elected officials for 30 years, and can kind of tell when they feel pretty confident about something, and it did sound good. Now, whether, I don't think Armstrong Hall was listed specifically. He said it's part of the
Minnesota State package.
Yeah, the Minnesota State package, which will be some horse trading and such.
Yeah, and I think one key element to Walz going to Rapidan Dam, aside from the obvious fact that he's allocated funding in the bonding bill for it, was it's kind of an infrastructure project. And the Republicans who I talked to have all made the argument that the bonding bill is specifically about infrastructure and preserving state assets. And it sounds like that's a lot of the message that was kind of being relayed yesterday, too. So I think that's maybe a point that Democrats and Republicans might be have a similar understanding of as far as this bonding bill goes, but we'll have to wait and see and kind of let it play out. And
I think the timeline is going to be really crunched. I mean, it's sometimes difficult for the legislature to get things done in a regular session on time, and now they're going to be a month, maybe 2 months into it before they can start. And I think that will be a little bit difficult to squeeze everything in. Maybe we'll see a special session. But I want to just pause again to thank our sponsor, Minnesota Valley Federal Credit Union. They sponsor this podcast and some other things we're doing here at the Free Press, so we appreciate their support. But Governor Walz also talked about his tax plan. He wants to lower the sales tax rate and expand it to services like accountants or funeral services or whatever. And this has been tried over the years 2 or 3 times by different governors. And the idea is that you will lower the rate for people who, on the lower end of the income spectrum who buy a lot of goods, buy things, and then the folks who get accounting services or whatever, they're maybe more able to afford those kinds of things. But then we spread the sales tax to them, and of course, anything talked about tax, Republicans are not going for. They say it's really a tough sell. I mean, you kind of have to sell it as it is lowering the tax rate for people, and people can choose to buy things. So they kind of have some control over how much tax they're going to pay. But expanding it to services, and economists, and I think various people have made the case that it would make sense in Minnesota to do that just because more and more people are using services, and that's where the buying is going. But that's going to be probably a tougher sell. I'll be real surprised if he gets anything on that.
Yeah, and then of course it is a budgeting year, which is kind of another discussion, but the elephant in the room, I think, in the state capitol is there's a very small surplus this year, but the possibility for a deficit in a couple of years. So I think they're really trying to look into the specifics of what this budget is going to look like and narrow down what they're looking to include.
Yeah, when we said it was going to be lower than the budget 2 years ago because of one-time money, federal money, whatever money. That budget was, I think, $72 million, and this one is coming in at billion. Sorry, this one's coming at $66 billion for 2 years, I believe, something like that. So that, I mean, they can say we're lowering the budget. But there's. And Walz, I think, is feeling, one of his big things is to stop the growth in spending in a couple areas. And one of them is disability transportation services. Now, he admits that sounds like mean-spirited, or we're going to take, transportation away from the kids with disabilities. But it's just the growth in that is 6 or 7% per year, and they're trying to keep it at 2 or 3% and be more efficient about it. And he did mention that we are the top state in terms of spending per patient or disability. It's something like $55,000 a year per student. Some states are at 20 or 30, even New York and other states. So that's going to be interesting. He is proposing some limiting the growth of some of the spending programs, and I think it's probably not a great sell for even his own party. He's probably getting some resistance on that, just because there's a lot of advocates out there who believe in these services, and you have to really take a look at them. Of course, they made a big dent in the deficit in special education funding last year. I mean, that we wrote for years that was 400, 500 million below what it should be, because the federal government said they were going to pay 40% of it, and they never have. And so they filled the hole on the special education budget itself. So I mean, there are things that they're trying to do, but I thought it was interesting that he came right out with his budget and said, we got to really cut the spending on some of this, and you don't hear Democrats talk about that much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And as we look to see the makeup of the House, I know the Roseville, which was the seat where the elected Democrat didn't meet the residency requirements, that special election is coming up next week. So it'll be interesting to see how the results of that affect, what's been going on at the start of the session. And that'll be something that we'll watch and see what happens.
Yeah. Saw a story this morning quoting some former Democratic leaders saying, they really messed up in not checking the residency of this guy who they endorsed. There was another guy who was running, and he was for sure living in the district. So kind of some finger pointing going on there, and we should have vetted him more. And even the speaker, Melissa Hortman, was saying, we weren't paying attention. So it's interesting, there's so many pieces on these political parties and, managing them, and, who's responsible for checking if that guy, is actually living in his apartment that he rented. It's one of those things. So it's happened in the past, and not very often, but it really, the story was about how this really didn't have to happen, and it's really created chaos in the whole legislative session this year. And what other issues are you going to be following with these legislators? You've been kind of talking to them.
Yeah, one thing that I'm interested in following up on is their efforts in making ambulance services a public service.
EMT.
Yeah, and so that's something that we started following last session, and the impacts that had to area ambulance services such as Lake Crystal. And so I think there's a lot of interest in making sure they have appropriate funding, appropriate resources.
Well, they got some funding, right, from the last session, and they still need more. And I'm trying to think if the governor was, he was saying, again, kind of a bipartisan issue, so we should be able to do something with it. In most states, their ambulances are just paid by the government, right? And we've got this kind of hybrid funding from different sources, right? And donations or whatever for ambulance service.
And I think the concern was if they're going to have a consistent stream of funding, that they want to make sure that funding source is always going to be there, so they can promise it for more than just a year or so. So that'll be interesting.
Another
to see.
bipartisan issue that we are totally behind, getting that ambulance service for rural areas. And a lot of people work really hard, the volunteers, and, just trying to help people with health emergencies in the rural areas, and it's important to do. So, but we're wrapping up here in a little bit. I'm trying to remember just other things we got from, he was very generous with his time, Governor Walz was, and he always, we've known him for years when he was in Congress, so he always makes a point to stop down and see us. He was here for the Ag Expo, speaking there. But we had 45 minutes, I believe, and so it's always interesting. And he was also asking in our newsroom what he likes to know about the news business, so that's kind of cool. He just has an interest in things like that, and he really saw the media up close when he was running for vice president. So I think there's a lot of people talking about that. But I want to just give another final plug here to our new sponsor, Minnesota Valley Federal Credit Union. They're sponsoring this podcast and the great journalism that goes behind it. So if you're getting something out of this, you can thank them. I'd like to also mention you can subscribe to our great journalism easily by going to our website, clicking on the subscribe button at the top. You can do it all online, or you can call us at 625-3764, or email us, readerservice@mankatofreepress.com. And you also can buy reprints of photos right online with us if you click the reprint button, or you contact SPX Sports, our sponsor for this, and our partner, 345-7196. Other than that, thanks for listening, folks. We'll see you next time.